Okay, everybody, welcome to this episode of the English School Alumni Podcast. Today, we are privileged to welcome Eleni Courea, who is class of 2013 and has forged an incredible career. You are still on that career path in journalism, and you are now currently, or she is now currently, a political correspondent for The Guardian. Welcome, Eleni.
Thanks, good to be here.
Good. So tell us, in the 12 years since graduation, where has your path taken you?
God, has it been 12 years?
Probably doesn't feel
Um,
like it, right?
no, it doesn't. Back in the summer of 2013, so pretty much exactly 12 years ago, I left the English school. Um, I went to Cambridge actually to study geography was my original offer and plan. But after a year, I switched to politics. The course at Cambridge is called Human Social Political Sciences, and it basically encompasses all the different social sciences, and you can choose to specialize within them.
Okay.
So I did, yeah. So I specialize in politics and international relations. I graduated with a degree in 2016 from Cambridge. And then I pretty quickly started out in journalism just a few months later, working for a sort of small specialist magazine writing about universities and science policy. And off the back of that, after a couple of years, I got onto a fellowship program to get young people into British political journalism, which was sort of the big break that I was always hoping for.
Mm.
And so since it was early 2019, pretty much, I've been working in political journalism up until this day.
Wow, that's incredible. Was Cambridge always on the cards for you, or was it they that offered the course that you wanted? Were you focused on that being a destination university for you?
I guess I was always, it was always an aim. If I was lucky enough to get in, I definitely wanted to. I applied to Cambridge and a handful of other universities in the UK at the time, and yeah, I was really really fortunate to get the offer to come here. I mean, I guess in the run up to A levels and like many English school students, I was always sort of just kind of working hard to try and get the best possible grades and get to the best possible university that I could. And all of this was pre-Brexit as well. So, the UK was kind of the kind of pretty much default destination for English school
Mm,
graduates.
yeah, it absolutely is. And you're right, with the whole Brexit thing, it's changed quite dramatically now, isn't it, for the English school graduates? So did the storytelling present early when you were younger, when you were at school? I mean, obviously you joined the English school at age 11. Were you already a storyteller then or a writer then? Where did it start, your sort of love of writing?
Uh, yeah, it's funny. I mean, I always loved, I think probably always my favorite lesson was English. I mean, for a while, I actually thought about studying English literature, but I never really went down that path. Partly, I thought I might kind of, it was like more of a hobby that I wanted to keep as a hobby, kind of reading
Mm.
and writing. But because I always loved writing, even from, I mean, back in primary school, I went to a sort of public primary school, but I did English lessons at the English school in the afternoons for native speakers. And
Okay.
then at the English school, I really enjoyed the English lessons that we did there and
Mm.
the kind of literature that we studied. So I always loved writing, and I was always very interested in politics. So even at school, when people would ask me what I wanted to do later, I would say journalism, because that just seemed to me an obvious kind of
Mm.
vocation that you where you could
Yeah.
actually use writing. Didn't
Mm.
necessarily know what it meant to be a journalist, but that was just something that the idea of which appealed to me.
Right. Wow. And is there any teacher from the school that actually made an impression on you, or you feel sort of encouraged your path as to where you are now when you were there at the time? I mean, you mentioned English lessons. How was your relationship with your English teacher? Did they encourage you in the journalism area?
Yeah, definitely. I do remember. I mean, we had some brilliant English teachers at the time that I was there. I don't know if they're still around. I remember Aditi Hajiriu, um, Karen Mason, who I think has left, Shura, Economo, and they all taught me, and they were all really fantastic. And I would say, yeah, I mean, like that was really formative having lessons with them, and I think they all of them would have encouraged my writing.
Mm.
Um, Yeah, for sure. But also really great history and geography teachers as well, all through the English school. And that, that was kind of the side of the politics and the kind of human society and
Mm.
uh,
Mm.
yeah, that side of things that I really enjoyed as well.
Yeah, yeah, very nice. You mentioned when we chatted before a bit about the course that you got onto, which sort of gave you a real sort of foundation in life as in journalism. But also you mentioned the knockbacks and how it built resilience. And sort of coming out of the English school, which is it's a good thing that the English school builds people up and gives you this impression that you are slightly impervious to these kind of things, and you're going to succeed. And in the real world, it's very different. And you kind of alluded to that was a bit of a shock for you when you actually got out there.
Oh, definitely. I mean, and I think that's something that is good to be prepared for. So at the English school, it's such a great school, and it does, everybody, it's a very high achieving school. But then when I came out into journalism to kind of try and make my way into journalism, it's honestly one of the most competitive things that you can try and do. I mean, there's other very competitive fields as well, but for sure, it's a relatively it's a very difficult field to get a full-time job in that's kind of well paid and stable. It's, a lot of people want to do it, and it's just a very changing industry where, the internet and
Mm,
uh, sort of digital technology has really upended the way that newspapers work.
mm,
So I must have applied for so many different graduate schemes and jobs at all of the big newspapers and channels and everything. Internships while I was still at school, internships while I was at university, and then for sort of graduate schemes and training schemes and full-time jobs later, when I had graduated. And I got so many rejections, and like kind of dealing with that and still pushing on was
mm.
really key to eventually eventually making it. Like you've just got to kind of get that one thing
Yeah,
that gets
yeah.
your foot in the door.
It's
Um,
it's the one person having a belief in you, isn't it? That's the thing, or the one break. And like you say, once you get in, you're off and away. But it's getting that first break, isn't it? And then rejection
yeah,
in
and
the meantime.
exactly, and learning from the reject, learning from whatever feedback you get. And you might get so close many times, but when they're only taking one person or like for a very
Mm.
small number of people, you could just fall short, again and again and again. And it's really important to be resilient and
Okay. And
yeah.
so did you get much in the way of feedback? I mean, it's the thing that we do is we encourage people to, when they've been rejected, is to write in and say, can you give me feedback? Did you get many people that responded to you in the feedback area?
It depended on, so I would say a lot of jobs never even replied for sure.
Mm.
If it was just applying, which is unfortunately a problem that does just exist. The graduate schemes were better at least even sending. I remember some of them would send kind of generalized. This has been really competitive. This is what the candidates we selected did really well. This is
Right.
what a lot of people did wrong, and then that was really helpful, even if it wasn't like completely individualized.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
could see what you'd done that
Okay.
fallen into. And
Mm.
yeah, no, I mean, in some occasions I did get some personalized feedback. I remember I came really close to Telegraph graduate scheme that I didn't get. I mean, in the end, the fellowship that I got like was absolutely perfect for kind of what I wanted to do. So I'm actually sometimes it works out in the way that you're actually happy that you didn't get some of the stuff that
Yeah.
might have like been even less suited to
Yeah.
than yeah, what eventually happens.
Yeah, it gets so in there. It's the perseverance, isn't it? And you mentioned earlier that it's a pool of people that tend to just move chairs in the industry. That when you mentioned that, that was the image that I got. So once you're in the door, you can then have the moving around. It's getting in the door that's the difficult piece. Is that
Exactly, because
right?
it really is like that. And I'm sure that's not just journalism. I'm sure that's the case in lots of industries. Because once I got my first job, you work with, once I got onto that fellowship, which rotated me around different publications for 4 months at a time, working with the editors and the teams there, you're just at such an advantage because they can see that, how well you work, what you're good at,
Mm.
that then they'll decide, they know you and they know that you're kind of reliable and it's definitely in political journalism because the way it works in the UK is that kind of political journalists are based in Parliament, and there's about, I don't know, like 200 or 100 and something people from all different publications. So you really get to know
Right.
people working from all across different publications in British media. So
Mm,
it just means that there is a lot of, as you know, a lot of moving around. It's a little bit like musical chairs. People move around different publications because once you've got the experience, you've joined that network of people, and you're kind of proving yourself on a daily basis.
mm,
It's much
mm.
easier to move around and get different jobs and yeah,
Yeah.
move on.
Is it a stressful job?
It can be. It's quite high. It can be high pressure, certainly, and in terms of deadlines as well. You know, there's always deadlines. If news is breaking, then you've got to be fast.
Mm,
It's
mm.
competitive as well. So there's definitely, it's not. There's a much less stressful career that you could take if you want a kind of a more leisurely pace of things, and especially because I'm a news reporter. That's a particularly kind of high pressure form of journalism compared to say
Mm.
writing features or making kind of podcast like longer term podcasts.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it can be.
Wow. So in terms of tell me what a normal day would look like for you, because I know you work from home sometimes and sometimes you're out on location. But what is a day in the life of a political correspondent at The Guardian look like?
So on a typical day, I'll go into Parliament. I usually go in Monday to Wednesdays, sometimes Thursdays. But I'll go into Parliament, where our Guardian office, political office is based. There's sort of 10 of us based there.
Okay.
And then it will usually be a kind of combination of three different things. I'll have my boss, the political editor, will probably assign me something that we're pursuing for that day. So say there could be a debate in Parliament about a particular issue, or it could be that the government is planning to do something later that week, and we want to get a bit ahead of the game and find out in advance what they're planning to announce or what they're planning to do. So I'll be sort of asked to kind of cover something or look into something. The second thing that I'll tend to have is I'll have scheduled either coffees or a lunch meeting with, people in politics to try and kind of establish contacts, get
Mm.
information from
Okay.
them.
Okay.
That's a really essential part of the job, so
Mm.
building contacts, developing sources who can then
Mm.
yeah, give you information on what's going on. And thirdly, just there's a lot of independent time as well to kind of pursue, say, tips you might get from your contacts, or interesting little tidbits or pieces of information that you might have noticed or dug up, and kind of think for yourself. This is something that I'd like to pursue. I've also kind of generally got time in a day to do a bit of
Mm.
that. So kind of juggling those three
Wow.
things.
So quite varied day. So I mean, in terms of contacts you mentioned, you would have to be pretty skilled at relationship building, I guess. That would have to be a competency of yours, wouldn't it? Not just to be a writer, because you've got to maintain that and eke out information from these people that they may or may not want to give you.
I would actually say it's more important to be good at
Really?
that.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's great to be a good writer. It's very valuable to be somebody who can write quickly and cleanly. That's the main thing for, even more than, especially as a news reporter, it's not so much about the kind of beauty of the way that you write, the beauty of your prose. It's much more about being clear and
Mm.
um, fast, and able to pick out the most important information.
Mm.
But I think it's more important to be good, good at relationships, good with people.
Mm.
As some, if you're working in news and you're working in a job where you're, generally the kind of most prized thing is getting scoops, getting in kind of exclusives ahead of
Mm.
others that you're competing with, and I think that's really essential.
Wow. Yeah, I'd never really thought about the aspect of relationship building in writing, but you mention it seems quite obvious, because without that, how are you going to move forward and how are you going to get the scoop? So amazing. Yeah, excellent skill to have. So okay, let's go back to your end of school. So what was it like transitioning from Cyprus to the UK and the challenges that you faced when you first moved?
I think with most Cypriots, I think the most challenging things to get used to are generally the weather and the food.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I actually remember when I first moved to Cambridge, it was a particularly kind of mild and sunny autumn, so that was quite an easy transition.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, I think that was, the cold and the darkness was just the hardest thing, and just missing out on lots of like really delicious food that we have in Cyprus. But I think because Cambridge is such an international city, the university is such an international place, it was a really good, place to transition. And when you're 18 and kind of moving away, it's just exciting because you're finally kind of going out in the
Mm.
world and becoming an independent person. So in general, it was a really positive experience. I really enjoyed it. I think those two things were the hardest.
Yeah, yeah.
And
How did
yeah,
you
so,
find budgeting? Sorry, carry on.
as well as being away from friends and family,
Yeah,
for
of
sure.
course. Yeah, how did you find budgeting? I mean, this is the first thing, you're out by yourself, you're out in the world alone, you're budgeting your money, you're cooking, you're looking after yourself after being well looked after. And Cyprus does have the big community spirit, right? And I imagine you go from this big community where everybody knows everybody and looks out for each other to you really are alone in this massive university, as is everybody else that's there in that first year, right?
Yeah, I mean, you'd think, but again, it's quite a sheltered place in many ways, in the
Okay.
sense that um, unlike other universities at Cambridge, you're based in a college. Your accommodation is pretty much set for all 3 years that you're there.
Mm.
So so in
Okay.
most British universities, you'll stay in halls for the first year, and then you'll move out and find a
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
Some other fellow students. It's not like that here. In Cambridge, in like the vast majority of undergraduates will stay in halls for all 3 years of their
Yeah.
undergrad.
Interesting. Right.
And then there's a servery, a sort of canteen that serves 3 meals a day, at quite a really affordable price. I mean, at the time when I was there, it was like, something like £3 for a kind of meal.
Mm.
Uh, it'll be
Wow.
more now, but it was really affordable,
Mm.
and just provided for. It was just part of, and at Cambridge again, it's the same in Oxford. You live in halls of 3 years, and like
Mm.
it's all maintained. There's cleaners who clean it once a week, so
Okay.
it's quite sheltered.
I was gonna, yeah, I was gonna
It's
say, yeah,
it's
it's quite like
probably a
easy
little bit
transition.
controversial.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So quite a soft, soft transition that way.
Yeah.
But it was all kind of, the idea is, to give you all the time to study, and it's all very studious place, all about reading and
Oh,
really immersing yourself in your discipline. So there's just this that's the culture, and
yeah,
that's
right.
quite, yeah.
Okay. So other than the hard studying piece, it's quite a soft launch into independence, isn't it, really?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I would say that. Yeah. I
Living
mean, I
up.
had to buy my own bedding. I remember that was a bit of
Oh,
a moment.
really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so let's move on to some of the stories that you've covered. What is your most memorable political story that you've covered so far, and why?
I mean, I would say without a doubt, I came into political journalism at the height of the sort of Brexit drama. And
Right.
by that, I don't mean the referendum itself, but the kind of after that, after David Cameron, who was prime minister at the time of the referendum, resigned and was replaced by Theresa May. And then her time in office, it was that's in the middle of that is when or sort of actually towards the end of that is when I started being in journalism,
Wow.
and it was chaotic, and it was very, Parliament was just. I remember, that there were people who had done this job for years, decades, talking about how extraordinary this all was, but coming into it, that was the only normal I knew. So
Mm.
just covering, late night sittings in Parliament as they tried to work out, it was just this impasse where the referendum had happened and they were trying to figure out how to implement it, and there were all these kind of conflicting views and forces pulling in different directions about what form of Brexit should happen, and actually a huge movement to have a second referendum and try
Mm.
and overturn the result. So it was just extraordinary covering the kind of late night sittings in Parliament. They had these indicative votes to try and figure out a solution that was acceptable to all the MPs. And the reality was that it was a real kind of deadlock, and it was one that was only eventually possible to break by a general election, which delivered a really big majority for the Conservatives.
Right.
But during that kind of chaotic period, I remember one of the really good early stories that I did kind of and that was really amazing to cover, was somebody had given me a tip that the Archbishop of Canterbury at the time, Justin Welby, was overseeing talks to stop a no deal Brexit with various MPs from different parties who wanted to do that. And like his intervention into politics in that way was just something that was really extraordinary and quite controversial. But yeah, that was one of the most kind of extraordinary.
Wow. It must be hard to decide what to cover, like when you've launched into that degree of chaos. I mean, we see it as chaos because we're on the receiving end of the news, but you're on the inside. It's like one minute you're covering this, and the next minute it's changing to that. And then it's, it must have been very chaotic for you right at the beginning. You're like, is this my life now?
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And it's kind of long. It was really long hours at the time. It was a lot of things to kind of try and digest. There was so much change. There was a lot of parliamentary wrangling. And, if you hadn't been around for very long, you weren't even kind of necessarily well versed in how parliamentary procedure works. It was chaotic, but really, really interesting.
What a way to start your career, right? And the James Welby story, the Archbishop of Canterbury story, must have been fascinating to cover as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. How do you stay objective and grounded while covering sort of polarized issues? How do you have a tactic yourself? How do you manage that?
It's a really good question. And I think it's so important because, I mean, there's just a real declining level of trust in the media and real increasing polarization. And people really have, I mean, even people that I know well, there's just this increasing view that the media is really biased or trying to obscure stuff or trying to kind of peddle particular narratives. And like my experience of it is that it's not that way at all. Or, even when there is every newspaper in the UK and in most countries will take a particular slant, but we'll be open about that. And there's a plurality that is the kind of fundamental thing about democracy. Newspapers might have particular slants, but you have so many different options from which to choose. I mean, I'm somebody who's worked in a variety of different places. I did 2 years at the Times, 2 years at Politico, and now I've been at the Guardian for just over a year. So different, quite different places with some different approaches and kind of institutional editorial views. But actually, the stuff that I write about hasn't changed much at all over those three publications, I would say.
Right.
The interest. I would say in general, I mean, I'm not a commentator, I'm a news reporter, so my job is to write factual kind of balanced pieces in general. The thing that I to answer your question directly, to the way that I find is most effective in staying balanced and grounded is to talk to people from all perspectives on a particular story. So if it's something that there's kind of very opposing views on, just talking to everybody and doing your best to reflect. I think the key word is balance and reflect everything, balance piece.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, you mentioned there being a news reporter instead of a commentator. It's again, that is two very different things that you would have put into one. And you're right, being commentator, you have your opinion and you're talking about things and you're discussing things. And whereas, like you say, yours is more factual, right? Or yours is factual because you're a reporter. And I guess that's what you learn when you're in university is the difference between the commentator and the reporter, right?
Totally. And I think a lot of young journalists want to go into journalism and think that like it's a really popular thing to kind of want to be a commentator and somebody who's got really strong opinions on what's going on in politics or society or culture, and think that you want to be writing about your views on it. I find, I mean, there's very few jobs where you can do that, and it's generally kind of a later career job. And in general, it's just much more interesting to be. You learn a lot more from reporting than you do learn kind of when you start in the industry that actually there isn't. Why would anybody want to know about your views on X and Y subject unless you've got some particular expertise or it's just a much more in demand and also fulfilling job to be somebody who's trying to get information and put information out there and report on things, expose things, or just explain to the public about what's going on in whatever to be covered.
Well, that's an interesting way of framing it. I'd never really thought about it like that because you would get younger generations who are very strong and opinionated. And you're right, that doesn't really work in journalism, does it? Because the whole point of journalism is telling the facts and telling the story, not about your own opinion. And you're right, when you're young and at 18, 19, 20, you don't have any weight behind your opinion, do you?
Oh, exactly. I mean, obviously, we all want to know. I mean, it's important for kind of the younger generations to have a voice, but fundamentally, like you're not. And that there are ways in which that's reflected, and with social media now, everybody's got a platform to express their views. But it's in terms of kind of a job and a career. I think, yeah, it's not something that it's
No.
yeah.
I mean, there are loads of subjects that age group could be expert in, but in terms of talking about political journalism, it's yeah,
Totally. And
anyone,
generally,
yeah.
yeah. And I think it's good to have an attitude of wanting to learn as much as possible, and
Mm.
expand your horizons rather than, yeah, necessarily kind of having fixed views and then just
Yeah.
rejecting them.
Mm. Oh, yeah. So has there been any moments of doubt in your career, and how have you navigated it, if there have been any moments of doubt?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I would say I mean, uh, so far, and since I've started out in journalism, I can definitely say that this is the right thing for me, and I really enjoy it. And I've got no desire to do anything else in the kind of,
Mm.
never say never, but in the kind of foreseeable future. I think you definitely learn. The thing that I've learned about myself and that I have had to work on as a journalist is, um, I I really enjoy doing investigative stuff and exposing things that, some people might not want to be exposed. But in order to do that well, you've got to be willing to confront people,
Mm.
like have some quite pretty difficult conversations, go to people
Yeah.
with difficult allegations, serious allegations. Um, I'm not naturally a very confrontational person. So that's something that, I've kind of realized, and that like that's one of the things that I find scariest about my job is like have it going to people with
Yeah.
with
Wow.
this.
Why
But I
would you
really, I
voluntarily
really,
walk into a fight, right?
yeah, exactly. Like go exactly. But I really love doing that type of journalism. I think it's
Really?
yeah. So I've just it's just something that I'm just learning to do, like be more
Mm.
confrontational
Yeah.
in the right circumstances.
Wow.
Um, yeah.
So you prepare yourself for those moments in your head and you have the narrative and this is what I want to get out of it. I mean, it's still going to be an adrenaline buzz for sure, isn't it?
It is for everyone, right? Yeah, even if you're like a really confrontational person, it is. And if you're going to somebody saying, we're going to publish this damaging thing about you, or you've done X and we believe you've kind of guilty of X and Y, impropriety or whatever. It's just a nerve-wracking for sure. That's true. And it's important to always, if you before you get to that stage, you've got to be really sure about whatever you're alleging or whatever
Mm.
information. So, I guess being cautious is good, and always
Mm.
questioning information that you might be given. Yeah. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting, exciting as well. I know so many things about journalism I never really knew. Okay, let's talk about advice for sort of prospective students that are thinking about going into the career path that you have chosen. Yeah, what would be the first piece of advice or the most overriding piece of advice you would have for somebody who's looking to get into political journalism specifically?
In general, my advice for people kind of looking to start out is to do what I did, which is to start with a job at a relatively small specialist publication, because that's where you really learn the trade and you really get to know what it means to be a journalist. You start doing your own stories, developing your own contacts, getting to know a beat, a policy area. I mean,
Mm.
I really enjoyed that first job that I did. And it was really good training, and it was confirmation this is something that I wanted to do, and it was a really good kind of first step into political journalism. And then from then on you can kind of apply to bigger newspapers, different jobs, and kind of move into the industry. But yeah, those first jobs that kind of they call them in the UK trade magazines or business to business publications, it's just a really good way to start out. If like me, you're not lucky enough to kind of get onto like a really big graduate scheme from the outset, or really, which the places for those are so competitive. So I think this is a really good other way in.
Okay. And your choice of degree and choice of university helped you? Do you believe that actual course was a massive benefit to you, or do you think any social studies or Bachelor of Arts would help in the area?
I mean, I loved my degree, but I would say you don't need any particular kind of degree.
Right.
You could do any degree, and then you don't need any particular background to be a journalist.
Okay.
I did later do, during one of my jobs, I did an NCTJ, which is a kind of professional qualification in journalism, and you learn certain things like media law or various other kind of things that are journalism training things. But yeah, you don't really need any particular first degree. Even if you did the science one, I think you could be a very good journalist.
So tenacity and confidence and people relationship building skills would be key to that, right?
Yeah,
for sure.
Exactly.
So what's next for you then? You said you were quite happy where you're at. Is there any sort of 10-year plan, another sort of step that you're looking at, or you would consider?
Yeah, so I mean, really happy with what I'm doing at the moment. I would be interested in a kind of longer term. I mean, eventually maybe I'll get bored of British politics, or or want to do something a little bit different. I've got one eye on sort of like in the longer term, maybe doing a foreign posting somewhere.
Nice.
I mean, particularly I'd be interested in doing a bit of time in the US, even if it was just a few months, to cover our American politics, which affects all of our lives. And it's just extremely volatile and interesting at the moment. So that's something that I'd definitely be interested in doing in the future.
Amazing. So if any of our audience would like to follow you, how do they find? I mean, obviously it's not hard to find people nowadays, but specifically, do you have Instagram, or do you have a link at the newspaper?
Yes. So I've got Twitter, now it's called X, and Blue Sky, which is a kind of new alternative one.
Yeah.
I'm on both of those, and on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Probably the three best ways to follow me, or get in touch if there's, if you need advice about journalism or anything like that.
That's great. So you'd be open if any of the students would like to have a chat with you?
Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, it's been fascinating talking to you. I would really like to extend the conversation, but we're running out of time. So, Phil, thank you again for your time, and thank you for all the input that you're having into the world of journalism, specifically in the UK, and trying to make sense of the craziness that's going on over there for the rest of us. And it's just been a pleasure talking to you and getting to know you. And I will try and look you up in about 10 years' time and see where you're at.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you as well. And thanks for having me on your podcast.
You're welcome. That's great. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you, Eleni.
Thanks, Victoria.
Take care. Bye.